Hello there. Welcome to Unit 2 of U.S. History B. This is Virtual Interactive Notebook 2, which is World War II. This is Day 1, the origins of World War II. Today's essential question: why was the Second World War fought? Write that just below the title. Remember, the title is Day 1 Origins. Your essential question is, why was the Second World War fought? The main idea is going to be origins. And I suggest that you set the mind map up the way that I've shown you, because we have a lot to cover today. I try to simplify all of this stuff, but we really do have to cover everything that I've written here in order to understand World War II. All right. So looking at this, coming off of origins, we have American isolation. American isolation was the idea that most Americans didn't want to go to war again in Europe, and why would they? Something like 150,000 American soldiers had been wounded in the trenches of World War I, and about 56,000 had been killed in a very short period of time. And it was awful, and what did the United States get out of it? I mean, the Germans were forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles, which was humiliating for them. It's not what America wanted. America wanted everybody to put their toys away and go home, essentially, and that's not what happened. Germany got punished, and it led to, arguably, World War II. So why would Americans want to repeat this? And if I was alive then and I had kids of fighting age in World War II, I frankly would also be an isolationist. That might be naive. Franklin Roosevelt said we have to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them here. That may be true, but if I was alive at the time, that's probably how I would have felt. And a lot of times isolationism is depicted as foolish, but if you think about it, it's a desire to stay neutral, a desire for peace. Anyway, American isolation. Most Americans didn't want to get involved in another war in Europe after World War I. This takes us to totalitarianism. There is a line coming off the top of totalitarianism, and I want that to be the definition. Totalitarianism is all the power in the hands of the state. And it usually means one person. It usually means dictatorship. And that's why it's total. Totalitarianism, total power is in the hands of the state. In our society, at least in theory, and I think in practice, the state does not have all the power. The state can't just grab you out of your house and throw you in a prison with no trial and no recourse. For example, in a totalitarian state, they can do that, and they do. So totalitarianism is all the power in the hands of the state. I have Stalin coming off of totalitarianism because we're going to study fascism, but Stalin wasn't exact. I mean, this is an argument. You could argue that Stalin was a communist fascist. But in the I guess, normal understanding of the term, Stalin was a totalitarian communist. Very briefly, a communist is someone who believes that everybody should live communally. And in Stalin's brand of communism, that communal living was headed by a very hyper-violent dictator. For Stalin, I want you to write down communist totalitarian. Right? So he was a totalitarian, but he wasn't a fascist. It's debatable, but for our purposes today, he wasn't a fascist. So write down Stalin, communist totalitarian. This takes us to fascism. The definition of fascism, there are 4 things. So emphasis on national unity. There's an arrow coming off of fascism directly downward. So I want you to write 4 things to define fascism. 1, national unity or nationalism. 2, militarism. So fascists they focus on loyalty to the country, nationalism, and they focus on building a strong, strong military. 3, the power of the state. So write power of the state. The state has total power in fascism. And 4, social Darwinism. You remember what social Darwinism is? Social Darwinism is survival of the fittest in society. Fascists wanted to build strong citizens, and that, at least in Hitler's case, meant that what they considered weaker citizens would be sterilized or executed through progressive policies, actually, from California, believe it or not. That's called eugenics. We studied eugenics earlier. So we have national unity or nationalism, militarism, the state has all the power, and social Darwinism. Those are the four criteria that your book uses to define fascism. The reason why fascism rose in Europe was after World War I, society was absolutely disintegrated in Europe. The old ways, the old institutions had gotten them into that mess, and young people rejected it completely. And this was coupled with really bad economic times. You know, we had the Great Depression here. Well, it was worse in Europe. So you have a people who have lost complete faith in their old cultures, and they have bad economies, and they go looking for extreme solutions. People panic in bad times, and they want a quick fix, and their quick fix that they settled on was fascism. We're going to build strong, invincible countries that won't succumb to this World War I thing again. 3 fascist dictators emerge. The first one is Mussolini. Mussolini was the fascist dictator of Italy. So after Mussolini, I want you to just write Italy. Franco was the fascist dictator of Spain, and Hitler was the fascist dictator of Germany. And they all spoke to each other, and they all gave each other assistance. Mussolini was first, and then Hitler, and then Franco. They're kind of contemporaneous. Franco had to fight a civil war against Spanish communists, and Hitler actually helped him out, sent him weapons, and actually tested a lot of Germany's weapons in the Spanish Civil War. So we have fascist dictators, and you know that Stalin, although not technically a fascist, was at least a totalitarian. And that takes us to this last item, which is a very strange word, which is Großdeutschland. Hitler promised the German people to build Großdeutschland, and Großdeutschland was Hitler's Greater Germany. His idea was he was going to take back the lands that were lost during the Treaty of Versailles, and he was going to add to Germany all German-speaking people wherever they were. So there were some German-speaking people in Poland and in Czechoslovakia and in Russia. Hitler trumped up a reason to invade Czechoslovakia. Oh, before we do that, see where it says Treaty of Versailles? Hitler rejected it. The Treaty of Versailles limited Germany's military size, and it essentially taxed Germany to pay for World War I, and Hitler rejected it. So for Treaty of Versailles, I want you to write Hitler rejected. Then up at appeasement, I want you to write Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia, and Europe let him do it. So Hitler invades Czechoslovakia. What he really did was he had secret police, I don't know if it was the SS, but he had these sort of secret agents cross the Czech border and attack a German position, and then Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia in response. He said it was defensive, which was ridiculous, and everybody knew it. But after he invaded Czechoslovakia, he had a conference with Great Britain, and the Prime Minister of Great Britain was Neville Chamberlain, and Hitler promised, he double pinky swore, that he would stop with Czechoslovakia. And Chamberlain came back to Britain and declared, peace in our time. There's a picture of Chamberlain shaking hands with Hitler, and they're both smiling, and we're going to avoid World War I, peace in our time. And then Hitler promptly invaded Poland. So coming off of appeasement, I want you to write, Europe lets Hitler invade Czechoslovakia, and then coming off of that, Hitler invades Poland. And it was the invasion of Poland that started World War II. When Hitler invaded Poland, France and Britain declared war on Germany, and we're off to the races. That will take care of today's notes. For today's output activity, this is very, very controversial, but you probably know that at least the far left, and I think some people on just the left, have accused President Trump's administration of being fascist. So I want you to take a cold, hard look at that, right? What is fascism? Do you see the administration doing the things that we saw fascists doing in the 1930s? And in 3 sentences, I want you to respond to that. I am not trying to point you in any kind of political direction. I just think that fascist is a big, big term. And if we're going to use that term, we should know what it means. We should be able to look at a situation, decide, does this fit the term? All right, that's it. That will take care of day 1, origins of World War II. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time for day 2.